Well, thank you so much for joining me. I have worked with you, as listeners, some know because I have talked about you a little bit, but some don't. I've worked with you since I think I was 12.
A long time.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I was definitely maybe 15, but young, and 32 now. So that's math that really, I think, indicates how much I love working with you, and how much your work and your unique spiritual perspective has really helped me in my life. Really, really deeply helped me.
Oh, it's just so good to hear. I mean, you can imagine what it's like for me, the joy in working as needed over a long period of time and see you go from this wonderful young woman really wrestling with a lot of things about how to be and now, flourishing. It's a joy. I don't have children of the body, but I feel like you're I'm not going to claim daughter, but I'll definitely say niece. How's that?
I'll take it. I'll take daughter. I'll take niece. I'm available for that claim. So
Family member, family.
definitely family, definitely family. And I still wrestle with things, by the way, for sure. But
Jane, I'm 73 and I still do too. So it's this ongoing thing, hon.
we just hopefully get better at it. And I think I am getting better at it. And so in the course of our work together, I've learned about you, because in our sessions you share whatever comes up as needed to share, and I've gotten to know some of your backstory. But I'd really love to go deeper into your backstory now, and start at the beginning. I read and reread your bio on your website, which is very beautifully written and really a very cool story. And you mentioned that you have had spiritual and metaphysical experiences since you were very young. So please, I have had those myself. It's so exciting to hear that from another person. Please tell us all what those were and what they felt like, and when it started.
One of the things I would want to say right off to get away from some sort of specialness is I remember, I think it was Robert Coles wrote a wonderful book back in the 60s on the spiritual experiences of children.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many different kinds. And in fact, lots of times when I've talked to people, they've said, "Oh, I've never had an experience." And then we start talking about it, and they remember a time that they were watching a hummingbird and just completely transported. But the experiences that I had several times as a kid and then repeated probably about 10 times in my life, but I'll tell you the first one that really oriented my entire spiritual life. I was in the backyard lying in the grass in my house. I think I must have been about 7 or 8 because I knew something about geography. And I remember I was looking up in the sky, and just out of the blue, I felt my body expand to my yard, and then my town, and then my state, which was Massachusetts, and then the country, and then the globe, and then out into the stars and the cosmos until it touched into this, I want to say, infinite but intimate vibrational field of love. And then it started coming back from that love to the cosmos, to the planet, to the country, to the state, to the town, to my body. And that was the longest one. It might have only been a few moments. It was outside of time. And then I had other experiences like that, Jane, but they were more like a moment. In fact, one time the priest was holding up the host at Mass, and this gold light just shot out of it. And once again, I was back in that field of love and then back here. It happened mostly in nature, though. And what that did for me from then on is that whatever I encountered, that was supposed to be religious or spiritual, if it did not fully attune to that love vibration, I knew it wasn't for me. So I really feel like, and another thing I would say is that as much as I've gone through different phases in terms of theologies and religions, etc., I've never doubted the existence of God. And I use that word, source, God, spirit. I love um, uh, uh, great spirit because it's non-gendered. But whatever I named that vibrational feel of love, God. And so that's always been my touchstone. And so it's helped me in a lot of discernment about what I go towards and what I go. If it doesn't build up love, then it's not for me.
I love that. And I have had certain similar, I remember the youngest I think I was when I had an experience that felt on that frequency of love is I was in Massachusetts, actually. That's funny. I just put that together. It's a thin space maybe. And I was on a swing outside of a hotel in Massachusetts with my sister. And it was a very interesting double swing. So you would sit facing opposite each other and the motion of your body swung you more and more and more. And we were singing the song from Peter Pan, You Can Fly. And we were singing it together. And, the lyrics are, when there's a smile in your heart, there's no better time to start. And we're singing and singing and singing. And I close my eyes because it's so beautiful. And suddenly it's like, I was like this, and it was so calm and so blissful. I just felt this like, I see that. I feel that. And I just came slowly back to singing and being on the swing. But that note, that frequency was like, that's the one that I want to, cultivate and trust really deeply and follow now that I know what it feels like. And you feel all the other frequencies out there and you can feel the difference.
And, Ken Wilber did such a good job in one of his early books about how we're given these little tastes of this reality that doesn't make this unreal.
Right.
But there's this undergirding reality that is just always there. And I just feel like for some of us, the door opens for a moment. Some people live in that, blessings upon them all the time. I believe we die into it. So if we don't experience it in an ongoing way beforehand, we will. But what a blessing to have that as an orientation. And again, part of what's happened in my work is people say, oh, well, I've never had it. And we go into childhood. And I've seen so many people like, you remember it. But my gosh, Jane, when somebody remembers that time, and I go, there it is. Mysticism isn't necessarily just Teresa of Avila, levitating in ecstasy. That's one form.
Right.
But really having that moment of just, that's the opening door.
Exactly. So having had that at a young age, you talk about as well that you were raised Catholic. That's right.
Boston Irish Catholic. That's even a particular flavor.
Right. Yes, I actually do know. I have the reason I was in Massachusetts, and I think it's cool that we have this vein of similarity is because my god family lives out there, and they are Boston Irish Catholic, and I see the impacts that particular strain of religion can have on a family and on people. And so I want to talk about how you early on could tell that this was not the way that you could connect to God or spirit. What was that? How did that uncovering occur for you?
I think part of it is, again, going back to that moment that just gave me this sense of, if it's not love, it's not God, it's not true. And I went to Catholic school with these very sweet Franciscan nuns. This was before Vatican II, 1950s, and I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, and we were being told that only Catholics would go to heaven. Not even Protestants, and I can remember looking around in my neighborhood and seeing people who just radiated kindness and goodness. And not that I'm not putting people on pedestals, but just good people, good neighbors, warm, great to the kids. And I remember thinking, love would not keep a person like that out of whatever heaven is. So I'd already begun thinking, gosh, I don't think I agree with the nuns. I was like, 8 or 9, but it was like, but it's kind of like kids, the emperor has no clothes. It's amazing the insights of children that then get knocked out of them. But the really powerful moment for me was when I was 12. My mother had just given birth to my youngest brother, Mark. And I guess it was after Mass, and everybody else had left, the rest of my family, and I was waiting in there with Mom. And this priest invited her up to the altar to do this ceremony called candling, and in which he would hold these 2 unlit candles under the throat and do this ritual of cleansing her after childbirth. Now, I don't know if this was past lives or lineage or what, but some rage came in me. This rage at seeing this pudgy, and I'm fat, so I'm not trying to make fun of him as a big person, but just this kind of like, supposedly celibate man cleaning a woman who had just brought in a child. And it was like, no. And well, and in some ways, I actually did some shamanic work to go back into that moment, because it was a little bit of a moment of soul loss, because I definitely did baby in bathwater. It's like I totally stepped away from any Western spirituality at all, with the passion of a 12-year-old. But so again, it's like I've had people tell me I've been medicine women in past lives, or when I work with my ancestors, it's these 13 women who were 13 grandmother healers. So I don't know where that knowing came from, but it was there. And I knew how wrong that was. And so I just stepped away. I had to keep going to church with my family, but as soon as I was able to go off to college, because I thought, that level of disrespect and misunderstanding of women and birth and the creation of life, that is, I simply can't participate in that. Yeah.
I didn't know that was a ritual done by the Catholic Church, but I'm not surprised, and I can't imagine. Yeah. I mean, rage is it's sickening to me, infuriating to me. And the idea that there's this arrogance to this masculine, it's misogyny at the end. That's just plain and simple.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
It's misogyny, and your response, it definitely speaks to past life wisdom, and thank goodness that it came through you so clearly in that moment.
Clearly, yeah.
And I understand. It's like your mother has just done one of the most divine things that we do, period, full stop, as a species. And some guy is
cleaning her like it's dirty or something.
It's like, dirty or something. No, yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I totally get that. And the the throwing the baby out with the bathwater, feeling so disgusted, and the passion of a 12-year-old. We're so passionate when we're 12. We have this beautiful, totally unbridled, forward heaving passion. And you go back and you reassess and readdress, but that is, and to see your own mother experience that too.
It's like, what was she, she was a very, devout and believed everything that was told her. And so I sometimes when I think about her and her life, it's like, what did she believe about herself as a woman growing
Mhm.
up in this, you know? And my being different from her was sometimes really hard for us, you know, because she felt as though what I was saying and doing, getting involved in the second wave of the women's movement in the early 70s, um, part of the sadness for me was that she experienced it as a rejection of her.
Mm.
And I was never quite able to say, sweetie, this isn't about you. This is about how you were taught to hold yourself as a woman, you know. So a lot of stuff around around all these changes.
It's hard. And, the pain that we sometimes experience in the immediate relationships of our, the here and now reality. And I experience this with my own family too, where um, I have found I can't avoid the conflict in the here and now because I am aware of a larger narrative that I'm working on. And the best I can do is say, to myself and to my ancestors and to my immediate family, but in my own, in my soul, I love you, I see you, and I'm doing this work for all of us.
Yes,
And I don't, it's not fun to know that the the work that you have to do can be misunderstood, and a member of your family can feel judged or abandoned or hurt, but the motive is love and it's growth.
exactly. And it's going to be misunderstood. And I'll share with you that 3 years after my mother died, she actually came to visit me. And unexpected, just popped into the room. And we had the most incredible reconciliation where she asked for my forgiveness for all the ways in which she had hurt me. And she forgave me for all the ways in which I hurt her as I pushed back. And it was really like any remaining karma between the two of us was cleared. So
Mm.
that's what I hope that on the other side, there will be an understanding and universal compassion, because you're right, when you're the one that's stepping out and forward, uh, it ends up hurting other people without in any way that being your intention, but it's just seems to be how yeah, it does.
I know it's the worst part. I find the more that I evolve as a person, as a woman, as a spiritual individual, the more I find these situations where I'm like, wait, what? No, I don't. Are you not? And then I have to do that work and accept what is, and also audit, which I feel like that's been my word of the week, is like audit myself and say, okay, well, are you in right relationship with yourself? Are you in right relationship with your compass? Are you in right
Right,
relationship with your ethos? If you are,
right.
and this is the result, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you
Yeah,
can do.
yeah.
And it's very painful. It's very challenging, but I love that you had that reconciliation with your mom. And I was thinking as you said that, because you have this karmic clearing and this sort of energetic resolution. And if you hadn't been who you were and pushed, that may not have been solved.
I mean, that's it. It just would have passed on. Whatever that wound is, would have passed on to another generation for somebody else to grapple with. But that thing about, like you said, it just coming back to who you're called to be, and not with intention hurting other people. But I had a dream at one point when I was thinking about moving out to California. And I'm the oldest of six, an alcoholic family. My mother was ill with alcoholism. And I had a dream where I was in a canoe and my siblings were in the water and they've got their hands up and I'm trying to pull them in the canoe and the canoe keeps rocking and I'm almost falling in and I'm pulling and I can't get them in. So my therapist had me go into the dream and she said, Ruah, what's happening? And I said, they're trying to pull me out of the canoe into the water. And that was like so painful, but it was also freeing. It's like, I love them. I bless them. I hope that they do whatever their karmic path is, but they were choosing to stay in the mess and I was being told that I needed to leave.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank God for things like dreams and visions and stuff that can be so sustaining because this is hard.
They're so sustaining. They are, that's such a good word. They're so sustaining. And yeah, it is hard. And it's also contrary to a lot of cultural narratives of how to treat family and, how to stay in family dynamic. And there comes that time when your subconscious is telling you, this is going to drown you. This is
That's
not
it.
for
That's it.
you,
That's it.
and you're, thank God for dreams. They're so clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
It
girl,
was it
you're drowning.
it literally I can remember being in the room with my therapist and realizing that, and I just felt all of my resistance, all my feeling like I can't do it because I love them and I'm supposed to help them. Everything fell away and I just felt freed to go. So yeah, thank heavens for that.
Yeah. Thank heavens for
Mm,
that. So very clear break from traditional religion in a very clearly, deeply spiritual person. Um,
mhm.
I imagine that you never lived in a fully secular way, but what was
Right.
the transition like as you were able, let's say when you leave home and you're your own person, you're becoming your own woman. What is your spirituality like at that time?
I lived in such an interesting time. So I left at 12 internally, and what
Mhm.
sustained me while I was still living at home were the arts, particularly poetry and
Mhm.
great literature. That's where I maintain my connection to the numinous. Um, great, wonderful music, wonderful art, beautiful poetry, and then in college I was an English major and around a lot of things like that, the arts that really maintain that connection for me. But when I graduated, I was in Cambridge and then Berkeley and then out in Santa Cruz. And things were just exploding. This is the early 70s. Jungian psychology, tarot, astrology, Hindu gurus who were coming to Cambridge giving, 6-month programs at the Unitarian Church, all these Buddhist teachers, the Cambridge Zen Center. The Upanishads were all being translated into English. It's like there was just this huge explosion of all of these teachings from other traditions. Um, and I will say that one of the things I was very grateful for from my Catholic education, which both was fairly rigorous in terms of theology, a particular story, as well as academic, I had a really good BS detector because
Mhm.
along with all the good stuff, there were also the people who were kind of the sorcerer, big egos who
Yeah.
had psychic powers but were really
Mhm.
on a dangerous ego trip.
Mhm.
But, I went to Boston University and studied humanistic education and started looking at Summerhill and all these ways of incorporating spirituality and into childhood education. And then when I did my master's degree in clinical psych, we had a whole piece about somatics and
Mm.
dream work and Jungian. So it was just a rich time where I was just exposed to all this stuff. When I was in Santa Cruz, I worked in a massage school and a hidden therapy program, and that's when I found. I guess what I would say is that the deep wound in Irish Catholicism, which is very affected by what's called the Jansenist heresy. My Italian girlfriends didn't have it. When I was in Catholic school, my Italian girlfriends had short skirts. They had the crucifix down in their, cleavage,
Leave it.
with boyfriends. And I'm like, how do you do Catholic like that? Because Irish was just like tight, tight, everything fear. And it was because this heresy called Jansenism came in that was very anti-body, anti-sex. All of this is awful. Just, try to be good so you can go to heaven. It was very earth, sensuality, sexuality, feminine, denying, and even negative,
Mm.
which was really harmful. So when I went out to Santa Cruz, and I had all this background and, I studied with Hinduism and Buddhism and Sikh and Sufi dancing and explored all these different things. And then with a lot of transpersonal and Jungian psychology, love tarot, because I got into it from Jungian psychology, from archetypes, working a lot with images and dreams. But when I went out to Santa Cruz in the early 80s, I really was aware of the deep wound that I carried in my relationship with the earth. And there was actually a wonderful little pagan group that I joined for a while. So I was a pagan priestess for a while. And I never quite took it seriously in the sense of worshiping a goddess, but we would go out and, take off our clothes and dance around a tree under the moon and do all these ceremonies. And it was just we worked with Jean Shinoda Boland's book on the goddesses in every woman. It really was like a deep dive into the feminine face of God, nature. So that was a big part of it. And I'll tell you a joke. My dad, who was dean of a law school, Catholic law school, my youngest sister was very involved in Opus Dei, which is Catholic fundamentalism. And I remember Dad talking to me once and saying, so I have one daughter in Opus Dei and another daughter who's a witch in Santa Cruz, and she's the one I can talk to. That's my poor father. I think he had steam coming out of his ears.
Yeah. Yeah. What is
what is this? And why are you the one that still has a brain as you're like dancing around the tree? But
goes to show, maybe dancing around the tree, the way to go, Dad.
Way to go, Daddy. But what happened is I began going through a big psychic opening, I think partly because I was doing hypnotherapy and spending a lot of time in trance. And a colleague at the place where I worked is Cherokee, and basically said to me, a door is opened and you either need to get training or you need to close it. Because if you don't close it, you're going to cause harm. So through her, she actually guided me into meeting a lot of Native American teachers and doing training in shamanic practices. But people who would send me to like the Shamanic Institute, where they were teaching things that were appropriate for white people. So we weren't like trying to become shamans.
Right.
But I learned a lot about the other worlds. And what I loved, Jane, about the Native American spirituality is it's so earth-based. That the earth is sacred, the body is sacred, sexuality is sacred, spirit speaks through creation. So that was profoundly healing. And then, as you know the story, Jesus started showing up in my shamanic work, which freaked me out. In the north of my medicine wheel, in buckskin with his arm over white buffalo. Oh, I fought with him for a long time until I finally found out that he wasn't who I was told he was in my childhood. And so he has become kind of my core teacher ever since then.
Oh my God. I mean, there's so much there that's so rich. I think about this a lot because I started studying Puritan literature randomly. My educational trajectory has been so instinctual. Let's just
say Puritan literature. Good heavens, Jane.
Yeah, so intuition driven. I found myself, I think it was like a college requirement, right? I had a certain number of credits that I had to get in lit. And I thought, okay, well, American Lit 1, what do I know about American history? Frankly, not that much. And I started reading this Puritan literature and these Puritan sermons. And I was drawn. I sensed I was like, wow, there is a deep passion that I can tell is coming from so much focus in this one tight. It's like they would use a word and it would be like everything is in this word, and I was like, that's wow. What is this? What's going on here? Like the word grace in their sermon would. This is where, and I was like, I see some kind of spirit here. What is this? And the more I studied Puritans in particular, the more I found like, oh no, this is to me, a corruption of spirituality. This is it's like flagellation. It's a torturous denial of the flesh, denial of the here and now, denial of pleasure, of connection, of female, of profundity, divinity, mystery, total shutdown, angular, masculine God, boundaries around everything.
Yes.
And then death and pray for
Yes.
a decent afterlife.
Yes.
And there's some version of that exists in Christianity, in Catholicism, and in the Protestants, it's in the Puritans. It's bizarre to me. I don't know. I don't understand the origins of it. That, to me, I just boil it down to fear and
Yeah. It's, well, as a spiritual director, I work a lot with stages of spiritual development. And so this guy, John Fowler, has written about it, and they studied primarily initially mostly Christians, some Jews in America, but the work is extended throughout now globally. And what's interesting, Jane, is the stages go very much along with Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development, which makes sense because any theology, frankly, any ideology, is going to go through your stage of cognitive development.
mm-hmm.
So fundamentalists, whether you're a fundamentalist Christian, a fundamentalist feminist,
Mm-hmm.
a fundamentalist Buddhist, a fundamentalist communist, that whole first stage is black and white, and the desire and the need is for sureness and control. If I do the right things, then I'm going to be okay. And in fact, you see a lot of people who have progressed beyond that but become addicts, and they actually will very often regress to a more fundamentalist religion because they need the structure,
The boundaries.
the boundary. But the problem is that, that's supposed to be a stage which we then can grow out of. But a lot of people are stuck in that stage. And I think you named it. I think what makes it hard to move out of it is if people are really afraid, it's hard to loosen up.
It's so wild what you're saying, and the stages of cognitive development. I'm like laughing at myself because I sort of just went through this, even though my spirituality is so expansive. I have gone through, particularly in the last 6 months, maybe, a shifting in my belief that I didn't even know needed to happen, where I definitely had a sort of, if I can just do the right things and do them consistently, things will be okay, and there will be a level of control, and I will be happy and content, and that looks like these expectations. Here's the list of what happy and content Jane looks like, and I'll get them if I just follow this code that I've built for myself. And that's not the thing. That doesn't work. And that's a very painful reckoning that I have had to be humbled by the fact that life teaches me in a lot of ways, and that a lot of the things that I want are going to show up really differently than I am expecting them to show up. And I have to integrate mystery and unknowing and pain and waiting and confusion into my narrative. And here I am on my high horse about the Protestants, and I'm totally going through a very similar
but here's the human condition. I mean, how many times have I judged somebody, and then like 2 minutes later, it's like there's a mirror. But what's so wonderful about what you're saying is that's what spiritual growth and development is. We kind of acclimate to a certain place, but then if that soul inside continues to consent to evolution, then stuff starts to happen. And it is painful because it's that unraveling. And, probably too much to go into today. We'll do this another time, but
yeah,
there's a whole teaching out there that I've seen a lot in the New Age about manifesting. And, you just get to a certain place of personal empowerment, and then you can control everything in your life.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't true. I think it's an important phase because so many of us have been disempowered that it's important to find our places of power.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, if anything will sort of knock some of that stuff out, it's aging.
Mm-hmm.
Because, because things don't work the way they used to work. And you have to start dealing with all different kinds of things, some people more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And if I haven't begun to develop some kind of relationship with surrender and mystery, then I'm going to block growth. And by the way, when I say surrender, I mean appropriate surrender. I love the serenity prayer. The things that I can control or change, do it. And I have more. Remember when I used to get migraines and I learned how to do hypnotherapy where I could reduce a migraine from an 8 to a 3. Use that tool.
Yes.
But that there are other things where the spiritual path is really one of surrender into the mystery. And that's a tough one, hon. So good. I mean, I want to say I'm sorry you had to go through it, and I'm glad you had to go through it because it's a good thing.
Totally.
I'll tell you a story. I remember there was a Hindu guru. I can't remember his name. He was at the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Mass, probably in like 73. And we're all sitting there. And first of all, he's an hour late, so people had already started to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Then he comes in and he sits down in complete silence for like another half an hour or 40 minutes. And people are like, what is this? And they leave. I had a book, so I could have been there all night. So I just, that's me. I was fine. So finally he says, how many of you have not started on a spiritual path? And several people raised their hand. And he said, I want you to leave right now because it's nothing that you think it's going to be. And a couple people actually got up and left because he really taught about this, that it's this ongoing unraveling of what we believe is true that is not true, and discovering a greater truth that is devastating to the ego, but you put it perfectly, peaceful and blissful for that deep truth inside of us. But it is hard. It's, I think he was saying, this is going to hurt in ways you can't imagine. It hurt. Yeah.
And you can't. I mean, I think that's the thing is that if you're living authentically to your being, necessarily that isn't going to pan out in this perfect way. And I think you're right. I think there is a reclamation of power that's really important. And we are incredibly powerful beings. I mean, neurologically, we're profoundly powerful. And I love the study of neuropsychology and the ability to reroute neural pathway. And at the same time, I think that goes hand in hand with the occurrence of things that don't match what you thought you needed, and being okay with saying, okay, well, here's what I wanted. Here's what I focused on. Here's what I worked really, really hard for. What's in front of me now? And looking and seeing, I did all these things. Wow. I have so much to be proud of. I have so much to admire. And what is the other material meant for? This has a purpose, and if the more resist, the more we struggle, and it doesn't change. It sticks around anyway.
That's right.
So if we can just be like, this is gonna suck, probably, you know.
And what can I learn from this? And I don't go into the thing about I created it or God sent this to me. It's like, I don't even bother with that stuff. It's like, I don't care about that. It's like, here it is. How do I welcome it? Not in the sense of whoop-de-doo, but in the sense of, all right, here you are. How do I engage with you as my teacher?
Right.
What can I learn from this experience? Because, at some point, we are all going to die. And when I pass through that doorway, I don't want to be fighting. I want to say, all right, I think I know I've done this before and I'm doing this again. And I bless and give thanks to this body. You have been a true and faithful companion. As I
Mm,
release you back into the earth, help me step through this with grace, and
mm.
not this grace, but that grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus starts to show up
Yes.
in your psychology, in your spiritual scape, and I want you to
Thinker.
say more. Yeah, I want you to say more about the North Node. But before you do, I think this is so funny because I was raised Episcopalian, and I actually am such an anomaly in that I had a very soft, kind, peaceful, non-bigoted, loving church. I feel like I thought everybody had that experience.
Oh,
And
gee, honey,
yeah,
no.
the older I get, the more aware I am of how like truly shockingly unique that was.
No.
Kind, accepting, loving. But we fell away from it for really natural reasons. And I felt really close to God. I loved God. I prayed often.
Mm,
My
mm,
prayers were very comforting to me, and I felt very close to God. And then it just sort of ebbed, but I didn't feel like, oh, I'm leaving um, God, or I'm leaving. I was just like, I'm going to leave the church. I'm going to move forward and figure stuff out, but I'm just kind of a next step on my path. And then I went to college, and we read the Bible as a text, and we
mm,
discussed it as a text. And I was just shocked to hear the hatred, the anger, the pain, the fury, the renunciation, the ridicule that people felt towards their religious upbringings, which were oppressive and aggressive and scary and harmful. And I was like, you guys didn't have like donuts and like a friendly choir and like people like, whoa. And I started to feel like, I don't want any part of that. I have my spirituality, but I don't use the language of
mhm,
Christianity because it's
mhm,
not popular. It's not
mhm,
vogue,
mhm,
to talk about Christianity or spirituality. And particularly on this show, as we discuss all these different topics, I've just interviewed someone who is working in a very religious way. And I really tried to sit with him and hear his language. It was hard,
mm,
referring to God as he alone, I struggle with.
mm,
But
mm.
I'm hearing him, his truth, his narrative. And I'm noticing in talking with him and even prior that Jesus keeps coming back into my mind because I love his deal, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, yeah,
I like the
yeah,
guy. He seems like
yeah.
I haven't found in that entire, boulder of a book, every passage about Jesus I find applicable to my approach to life. And that I've actually been, kind of struggling with that because again, I don't want, fundamentalist Christians. I don't want to, I'm cool. Like I don't, ugh. But I cannot deny that I think this is really, there's a profundity and a spiritual validity to this teaching that has maybe been misrepresented by a lot of, and appropriated even by a
Yeah.
lot of Christian cultures. So with all of that said, how did he come and occur for you?
Well, it's, like I said, I was doing shamanic work, and he started showing up in the north of the medicine wheel, which is the place of the teacher.
Okay.
And when I went to the woman I was training with, I told her after, I mean, and he was funny. I just said, go away. He said, no. I said, listen, I only work with women. He said, tough.
Let's do
And I
it.
said, why are you here? And he said, no matter where you go, there I am. It's like, and so I finally went to her and I just said, this crazy thing is happening. And she said, oh, when I met you, I saw him in your aura
Whoa.
because you're in his tribe, but I knew not to say anything because it would upset you too much. So I, they talk about having the come to Jesus meetings. Well, I had a couple of come to Jesus meetings with Jesus and basically said, I don't believe you're the only way. And he said, I'm not. You
See,
know,
that's why I
yeah,
like him.
it's like that there was such a sense of this is this deep, for me, he is the deep teacher of the love path. And I have lots of friends who are, and I mean, they all come to the same thing because putting on the mind of Christ is also obviously a consciousness shift. And I have friends, good friends who are Buddhists, and he's the great master of the mind, but then loving kindness arises. But the Jesus that has come to me has only the most profound love and respect for all the other ways in which the truth shows up. So there was no sense of you have to judge others. And it was an invitation to become Christ-like. It was I remember I was reading at one point that the English word believe, which now is about cognitive consent to a bunch of things, originally meant give yourself to. So when Jesus said, believe in me, he didn't say make up some Apostles' Creed and you have to go check, 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 and then you're in the group. He was saying, walk the way, which is the original path, in the way that I have walked. And you are also the daughters and sons of the divine, who he called Father. And so I began to experience this Jesus who was really about Christ consciousness, about love, about poor J.D. Vance. He said something the other day when somebody asked him about all the Haitian stuff, the obscenity that he was doing. He goes, well, it's in the Bible, the family first. And I'm going, have you read the New Testament? One of the reasons they had to kill him is because he was saying, it's not just your family, it's not just your tribe. They needed to get rid of him because he was trying to blow up all that stuff. So in fact, I even have I will not let the I was going to say crazies, but I'm not going to say that. The fundamentalists own Jesus. It's like I love the nuns on the bus. I belong to Faithful America, which is all these very liberal, progressive Christians who are always doing things to try to stop the stuff that's sick. What happened for me was, after fighting with him for a couple of years, I said, okay, all right, I'm a Christian, fine. Then I kind of felt like, well, I have to find a church. So I went to the Quakers and I went to UCC. And then I went to the Episcopal Church, which I love because where I was living, it was a beautiful building with a wonderful choir and a female priest. And I was sitting there going, please, 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 please. And I kept hearing him say, I'm sorry, hon, but I need you in this crazy church. So I joined this Catholic church for a while, and I'd already started going to Catholic retreat centers because I was meeting these wonderful people. They were, all different traditions, not every, Protestant, Catholic, but lots of other people. There was like a bigness about them. They were really kind of the contemplative activists, the mystics and social justice people. So I'd already been doing that as a way of kind of trying to enter in. And then I joined this parish, which I lasted for 2 years. And I have to say to you, I'm not quite sure where I am now. I'm totally a Jesus person. But I feel like, and of course I was being brought in during all the time of the revelation of all the sex abuse. So I left around the abuse of women, and I'm being dragged back when all this stuff is coming up. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. But I think what happened, Jane, because I have not found a church here that I belong to. It's like I'm involved in the Citadel Center for Spiritual Living, about an hour away, but I haven't found anything. The Catholics are too conservative. The others, it's not a fit. I feel like, and I haven't fully formulated it, but it almost feels like I've been able to reclaim the mystics, the social justice. I love reading the different words of scripture and learning what they actually mean. Like when Jesus said, the kingdom of God is you, that word means both among, but also in.
Mm,
Um, that the word that Jesus would have used for the Holy Spirit would be the Aramaic equivalent of ruach, which is feminine.
mm,
So, I mean, that's the stuff that's the English major. I love that
yeah.
stuff, it's like, because it breaks up all this junk that they've put on it. But I almost feel like I was brought in to kind of repair that rigid split and to discover, again, the people like the mystics, Dorothy Day, the parts of the tradition that I can really honor and that I know are a part of my roots.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm on the way, and I would say that I'm a disciple of Christ. And I suppose if somebody asked me and I had to tick something off, I'd say Catholic because it's a big tent and I'm there with a bunch of other radical, progressive, mystic crazies. But I feel now like uh, the Jesus that I'm with is bigger than any church.
Yeah.
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 So I don't label myself unless I have to for some reason.
Hmm. I love Christian mysticism, and are you familiar with Giordano Bruno?
No, you sent that to me and I have to go look him up.
You're gonna die. You're gonna just die.
Oh,
I,
wonderful.
I feel so
Oh, I just
pleased.
screamed into your ear. Sorry about
Oh, no,
that.
no, you're fine. This is a purely celebratory adjust because I'm so excited that you didn't know about him and that you are gonna. So I found out about him in 2018, 2019, right after I'd graduated college, and I was I didn't finish the application, but I was applying for a Watson scholarship to study the nature of good and evil because I was just really struggling with like why I don't, where is it coming from, why does it feel this way? And it's very fascinating research that in many ways this show still gets to do, and I can't get lost on that. However, I was researching one day and I came across Giordano Bruno, and he was a monk in the 1400s, I believe, who basically he was, involved with the Vatican, and he started uh, to conceive of and teach the idea that God is in everything, and that everything is inherently. He was, kind of the four one of the forefathers of sort of not pantheism, but just this sense of like God is everywhere. God is in you. God is not in the church waiting for you to come see him. You are God. I am God. We are God. And there is no hell waiting for sinners. We are in a divine landscape that we are inhabiting this. And they tried him and killed him, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Burn
I
him.
mean, I love Meister Eckhart, and they excommunicated him after he died. They dug him up and put him in. But that, and by the way, you said pantheism. What he was doing was panentheism.
Thank you. Exactly. That's the word, panentheism.
That's Native American, that's Saint Francis. Well, even I think it was Thomas Aquinas that said there are two scriptures, the
Mhm.
Bible, but creation. That this is all the body of Christ,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
Exactly.
I will go, because usually my favorite mystics, well, I mean, they wanted to kill Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. John of the Cross was tortured by his brothers. But I remember when I found Teilhard de Chardin in college, and I called my dad and I said, Dad, I just found this wonderful guy. I just love him. And he said, Well, honey, he's like, forbidden by the Catholic Church. Okay. And then, Dad, I found this wonderful book, The Last Temptation of Christ. Well,
Right.
honey, that's on the forbidden book of, and I just decided I'm not even going to tell it anymore because my relationship with God was cultivated by exactly what the Catholic Church was saying we weren't supposed to be reading. I'll go find Bruno. I'll love
You'll
reading
love
him.
him. Yeah, and I bet he's, on some list even now of and that's the thing that's so funny is like I don't well, I think we've, it's a fear-based evolution, and then there's corrosion and corruption that happens, very human greed, the nature of oppressing societies, maintaining power, and this is done in the name of Christ or in the name of any sort of spiritual entity.
That's right.
And I think it's a shameful misuse of what is truly divine. And I think, it just makes so much sense to me. Of course, a powerful organization is like, hey, we don't really want you saying that we aren't critically necessary, and that coming and paying us money every Sunday to make sure you don't go to hell is not needed. There's just this. So but he's amazing. And I remember finding that and thinking, wow, again, I felt the bloomings of a resurgence of appreciation for Christianity in a different way, in a mystical way. Yeah. Because it almost felt sterile to me by the time I was graduating college.
What I'm noticing is I think the spirit is really very active outside of the churches.
Yeah, yes.
Because I think the liberal churches, unfortunately, sort of almost became like embarrassed about Jesus or something, and they became like Rotary clubs, which is fine, but you can go to a Rotary club if you want that. And the conservatives got more and more tight, but I feel like a lot of our forefathers and foremothers were these mystics, like Bruno. And I think the other one was, Michelle Perret, I can't remember her name now, many of whom were excommunicated and killed. And yet they were intuiting this vastness that the church couldn't handle. But what's interesting in terms of the evolution of consciousness is how many people, I had to leave the church in order to stay faithful to God.
Right.
And a lot of people have said something similar, that God is the one who led me out of the church. That's an incredible thing to say. And so, she's out there stirring things up. And I think having the writings of a lot of these mystics, I read Meister Eckhart, and he was or John of the Cross, and Thomas Merton. It's like they're just spot on in terms of where you've been brought. So thank you. I have a new person to explore. That's always fun.
Yeah, you'll love him, and I'm excited to follow up with you and see what you think. And it reminds me, because when you and I first started working together, I remember I had a vision in our first session we ever had. I had a vision of being held by, and she's still one of my spirit guides, this huge, like a Gaia entity. She's made of stars and night sky. And she's this huge, feminine, strong energy of just cosmic energy and matter. And I saw her, and it was great. I was just a little star just bouncing around, and she was like, just play, Jane, and it's going to be, you're safe. She was like my mother, like, you're safe, and just play and play. And then she held me. I was tired, and she held me, and I rested. And she has been with me ever since. And then I met Anubis in one of my sessions. I don't know if it was with you or on my own. And then
it was on your own, because I don't remember that, but how wonderful.
He was big deal. And we hung out for a while, and, he still comes around, and I feel like Jesus, Anubis, this entity, this energy, again, it goes back to, we all align with a frequency that is, I don't know if I could use the word right, but it is maybe our best frequency when we, kind of like, it's the frequency of most benefit to our being and to all beings. That's the one. And I don't think there needs to be, it totally makes sense to me that people would leave organized religion. That is like, putting boundaries around that, or saying, this person, like, I love that Jesus comes to you and he's like, I'm not the only way to do this. Oh my God. I'm just a manifestation of this. And this is bigger than all of us. This is just, here I am aligned with it, manifesting it, helping, sharing with you. And if someone else comes to someone else and shares it, it's the same. It's like saying love or amor. Like, it's the same.
It's
It's
the same.
just different words.
Yeah.
And so I want, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I want people to feel braver in their spirituality and more vocal in their spirituality, and to be able to sort of get rid of the shame that makes so much sense that it would be like, the way you did the baby with the bathwater. People are like, get me out of here. I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. This is crazy. But then they lose
That's
their
right.
source.
Right. Again, they think, and there's, I do want to say that one of the challenges of leaving church, leaving Sangha, synagogue, etc., is it's really beneficial to be like in some kind of a group or community that is supportive, not like, you have to believe this in order to fit in,
Right.
but but and that can be, there can be a loneliness on the spiritual but not religious path, and I'm hoping, it's like there's this whole group of, like, they're called the ex-evangelicals, that they have a big now social media presence where mostly young people, their spirituality has evolved beyond their evangelical churches, but they found each other to form supportive community. And tell me about your spirituality, and let me tell you about mine. So I think trying to help people find some sort of way to have community that isn't repressive but more invites, because you can kind of go off the deep end.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to have some kind of containment, or at least somebody to check in with.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying, that for so many people it's just, the purpose of any, I don't know if I should say real religion, true religion, healthy religion, is to support people in different stages. And what happens is that Christianity in the West is basically stage 3, which is called conventional. My way is, it isn't so much like, I mean, the fundamentalists are very black and white, and you're going to hell. Conventional is like, we have the truth, and this is wonderful, and come on in, and we love you, and let's show you. And it's this big, love fest community. I remember one woman saying to me, I'm so happy I'm Catholic. I just wish everybody could be Catholic. And that's so dear. The thing is, the next phase, personal faith, is when you start thinking, do I really believe that or not? Do I believe that because I believe that, or because some priest or pastor or rabbi or whatever told me? And the churches are not good at fostering that more adult faith, because as soon as you start questioning, people think you're losing your faith. People think you're, like, going to go to hell or whatever, or you're going to leave the group. In fact, when a lot of people start questioning, they're kind of pushed out of the group.
Right.
And then what follows, the personal faith is opening into the mystical. Well, if we had churches, I really found the retreat centers were the places that help to hold personal faith going towards the mystical. But how many people have access to retreat centers, either financially or having them around? So you have all these people who've blown out because their experience of religion is something that they've outgrown, because they've never been told there are other ways to be Christian. There are Jewish mystics. It's like, I mean, most Catholics, they've never read any of the Catholic mystics.
Right.
So we've done so the churches, the religions have done a terrible disservice. So I'm glad you're out there saying, this may not be for you, but let me just tell you that there is a way to be attuned to that deep inner knowing.
Yeah.
That awareness of the interconnectedness of all things that isn't nailed down by or manipulated by a particular story.
Right. Exactly. And to be able to reclaim that is so important. And I think everyone needs it the same way we need shelter and water and food. I think it's a very vital part of our inner landscape.
Yeah. I mean, because because so many people, it's like, you look at, like, the amount of depression or feeling of emptiness,
Yeah.
or just trying to get more and more and more and more crap because maybe this next thing will fill that emptiness.
Right.
And I remember Thomas Keating, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, a very kind man. He's a Trappist monk. And he rarely got angry, but he said the one thing that really made him enraged was anything that interfered in somebody's relationship with God. You know,
Mm,
because this was during the time of the sex abuse stuff and all these things. So blessings upon you doing this work, because there are a lot of folks who are empty
hmm
and looking for something, and they
hmm
don't know that, again, like I said, there can be a spirituality that is
hmm
enriching and enlivening
hmm
and enholing,
hmm
that isn't demarcated by those structures that I think are in the process of collapsing, to be honest with you.
I would hope so. I mean, frankly, I would really hope so. And the stages that they're in now feel to me to be so destructive that I just don't know what kind of upward trajectory they could be going in. I don't have a foreknowledge on that. But so so I want to pivot a little bit, but in staying with the vein of finding your spiritual center. I know that you, and I think I have this right, you worked in rape and domestic abuse crisis counseling for a long time.
For 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I want to, I'm trying to position that in your spiritual journey, where you were spiritually, and that's a big frame of time. It's almost a decade. So obviously you evolved in many ways over those years. My biggest question though is how were you able to hold that space? And
You know, I think it took me 3 years in to actually begin to integrate the two, because when I first got involved, it was pretty soon after I got out of college. A close friend of mine was assaulted, and I was horrified by how she was treated. And I was actually working in the book business, but I started doing volunteer work, and then later started doing doing paid crisis counseling. Um, but this was in the early 70s when some of the rape crisis centers were just beginning, Jane, and they were not healthy places. It was fueled by love for women, but a lot of anger. And there was almost like a culture where you proved yourself by burning out. So, I
mm,
mean, I was on like, beeper for like 5 days in a row. I mean, it was just like crazy. And I burnt out. I had mononucleosis. I spent 3 months in bed.
oh,
And during that time, that was a time when I realized I had my spirituality over here. And to begin with, it was more like tarot and astrology and Jungian psychology, and Hinduism kind of was the first thing, and then a little bit of Buddhism. So that was there. But I wasn't doing like any kind of a regular practice. So after I got sick, I thought, this is crazy. I'm just like, you know, 80 hours a week.
mhm,
And so I really began to just say, I need like a meditation sit every single day. I need to go take a walk in nature every single day.
mhm.
And I also got back into counseling because I needed a place where I could go and vent.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was in Berkeley, I was coordinating the peer counseling program at the Berkeley Free Clinic. And we had like we were connected with Bay Area Women Against Rape. So I was doing peer counseling and then stuff over there. Um, we started doing kind of support groups for crisis counselors, as a way to just kind of vent and release and cry and rage, and then kind of gather back and kind of end with a lot of us had learned energy healing and massage. We used to give each other massage, but it was really a couple of years in before I even realized that I had split these two worlds, and this one was really not healthy.
Mhm,
So, but after I got sick, it was kind of that's when it was like I've got to get some practices going to help
mhm,
me. Um, and to be honest, I did it off and on for 8 years, and I think that was probably 3 years too long. I wish
mhm,
I'd ended after about 5 or 6, maybe. Um, but just felt really committed to the place and kept doing it. But that's when I decided to train as a psychotherapist, and that sort of shifted into really a field that reflected much more on self-care.
And is that when you began spiritual direction?
Actually, no. What happened was I was well, they didn't call us therapists, a mental health counselor here in Massachusetts for 6 years. Went to California, and my licensure, my training didn't transfer with California. They had changed the rules. So I trained as a hypnotherapist. And then I became the hypnotherapist that therapists would refer to because I had that training. So I did hypnotherapy for about 15 years. And in about 99, so I'd done it about 12 years by then. In 99, a friend of mine said, you should really look into spiritual direction because you're doing all this I was doing medical hypnotherapy and psychological and stuff, but a lot of my work was, especially since I was training in shamanic counseling also, a lot of it was about spirituality.
Yeah.
So I never even heard of spiritual direction. So I found a director who I worked with for a year, which I really liked. She was very helpful. And then I got my certification in 2001. And for about 10 years, I had both a hypnotherapy practice and a spiritual direction practice. And then about 2011, I closed hypnotherapy. And since then, I've just been doing spiritual direction. So it's been a long, always somehow in the healing arts. I think I started doing volunteer work at a rape crisis in 77. So it's been all these different forms of healing artwork. Yeah.
Do you find that I feel sure you integrate all of your training and your research into your spiritual direction.
Yeah.
Do you think this was the most successful use of your path, your tools, your ability in spiritual direction, in that ability to work one-on-one in that way?
Yeah, it feels like a kind of fulfillment that I never would have, and I didn't even know what spiritual direction was. I never heard of it. But my psychology background is always there because there are times when I want to refer people for therapy or I know how to work with people who are in counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Trance work happens a lot, but not in a formal hypnotherapy. But I mean, it's kind of like, remember, I just say, Jane, if you close your eyes, what would you see? So and same thing with the kind of the shamanic training and then the hypnotherapy training. I just feel really at ease in different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a way that I can sort of see, I think there's a poem by William Stafford that's something about the way it is. And it goes, there's a thread you follow and you always hold on to the thread. I can remember as a child, almost all Irish Catholic little girls want to be a nun at some point in time. So I remember, I don't know how old I was, I wanted to be a nun. But my prayer was, make me your instrument. Make me your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back at this winding way, which has been all over the place, it had this thread, I'm sitting now going, all of that has contributed to my being able to sit in the heart of God with a person and then just bear witness to how that mystery shows up in their life. I mean, I work with pagans, I work with Catholic priests. It's like, I just feel so blessed is the word, Jane, to be here doing this. And whether I'm teaching a class or because now a lot of my life is about people saying, could you teach a class in dreams or could you teach a class in shamanic journey for white people or whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
And or how about tarot? And it's I feel like I walk in two worlds, the physical world and the world of spirits. And then always with this awareness of this background of the divine. And that's where my work takes me. It's like, how lucky is that?
Yeah.
You know?
I do. I know what you mean. I do. I feel like with this show, we have a similar
Yeah.
even sitting down with you, everyone that we've been able to sit with, I'm like, I get to do this.
Do this. And that's I would want that for every person. If they, if they can't do that in their job, because there are some jobs it's hard to, but that some place in their life, there's that place of what the Buddhists call right placement. Because it's joyful.
Yeah, it is. It's joyful and it feels, it feels useful, which is so exciting.
Make me your instrument. Yeah. Yeah. Right. You're bringing these things out into the world and you're going to reach people that I don't reach. We all kind of have our little placement to just say, this is here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find a safe way for you to touch into this thing that is most nourishing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, okay, I want to be mindful of time here, but I have two more questions for you. My last question is, what wisdom? So, you're 72? Is that right? 73. And I'm 32. And we have much in common. And then we have so much that's different. You have gone forward in this path much further than I've gone. So I have a ton more learning to do, figuring to do. And I think we have a disconnect in generational. There's these big gaps, generation to generation, and it really it's a disservice to everybody, young, the old, the middle aged. It's just such a bummer, and it's a total. It's like we shoot ourselves in the foot by doing this in every direction. All of us suffer from these divides, so it's important to me to hear your thoughts on how. I feel biased and very lucky because from a young age, I've connected with people of any age at all. So I feel like, I think it's because we just touched on this in another interview. I didn't go to traditional schooling. So I interacted with people of all ages all the time. And I didn't put together that one of the conditioning qualities of school is age barriers.
Sure.
Inherently, you just 12-year-olds to 12-year-olds or whatever, you have the range of like 2 to 3 years. And what is that? That's not enough for you to get this expansiveness.
Right.
What is wisdom that you have to share with younger generations? And how do you think we can reconnect?
If I was going to try to think of some core wisdom statement, whatever that is, it would be something about the journey as it unfolds can be about ever deepening tenderness for yourself and for everyone else. That as we become aware of how we're all so interconnected, we are all one. And I actually pulled one of my poems for you because you said something about reading.
Yay, that was my last question.
We're going to end with a poem that I pulled specifically for you, my artist friend. That first of all, there really is this awareness of like absolutely everything is interconnected, and that love loves even in the places where I have come to in my own human condition and woundedness hate. I've developed a practice that just emerged. My hands started doing it and I went, what am I doing? Every time now when I drive around here and I see a Trump Vance sign, what's happening is like I just say a blessing. May you heal, may you be at peace, because I know there is suffering there. That's not me. My thing is like, alas, but there's some greater and greater compassion for who we are as people, greater tenderness from the self, and a greater capacity to encounter one another as we are less judgmental of self and others. it's all about falling in love with ourselves and one another. And that is so, there's just this deep peacefulness that can come that just undergirds everything. And it allows for a kind of aliveness. It's like you can see more. Jesus said, let those who have eyes to see, see. It's like you're outside and you see the leaf or you see the person. Um, so yeah, I mean, my journey has just been increasing tenderness. And other elders will tell you other things because they'll be the ones who come in with the sword of righteousness, that there needs to be a circle. And we all have different gifts. And I've just discovered that my gift is just this encountering and falling into more tenderness. And Jane, part of my joy in having this conversation with you is knowing that a lot of people who listen are younger. It is like, I don't have children, and it's really hard to connect. So what I do, and around here, like we don't have good coffee houses. I just get into I go to Whole Foods and I'm standing next to some kid who's got like an owl tattoo on, and I'm going, oh my gosh, tell me about that. And we have a conversation. And what's owl mean to you? And then I say, well, gee, in different traditions, it means this and it means that. And we have like a moment of encounter. I feel like as an older person, one of my jobs is to see younger people in a way that encourages them and supports them. It's like, when the climate change, I mean, it's happening faster, so I might not get out of here before it happens, but you guys are going to be the ones, gals and guys, are going to be the ones handling all this shit that's been accumulating for the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. It's like, holy God, we need to support you. So I don't have a lot of good ways to meet people. So just whenever I'm any place, whether it's at the drugstore or the store or the gas station, there's this really delightful young man who's Hindu at my gas station. And at Christmas time, like first year I came here, I just said, I'm not going to say Merry Christmas because are you Hindu? And he goes, yeah. And so I said, so what do I say to you? So he told me a phrase and I told him a phrase. And it's like, so I just try to make contact where I'm an older person and I see you and I honor you and I bless you. And I'd love it if younger people showed up, but that's how they do in my life. And so I wish there were, because a lot of this, like the Center for the Spiritual Journey I'm involved in, we're doing, dream work classes, and I'm doing the centering prayer group and all this stuff. The youngest people coming are 50 years old. This is not where younger people are. But do I have Facebook? Do I even know what this TikTok stuff is? No. I mean, I don't want all that stuff because I crave silence and solitude. But I think more older people need to, get your act together and get out there in the ways where younger people can find you. But that hasn't been me. So I'm doing it at Whole Foods with the owl guy over the broccoli.
I think that's beautiful. You and the owl guy. And I said recently, and I've been liking it, as like a small rock makes a big ripple. It's very impactful what we can do with one conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do it anymore because I'm not quite sure where I am with this, but now I tend to wear more one of my guide things, but every once in a while I'll put on a crucifix and then I'll get into a conversation with somebody about shamanism, because I am not going to let the fundamentalists own Jesus.
Yeah.
I have an American flag in front of my house, believe it or not. It's like, oh my God, because I'm not going to let them own the flag.
Right.
I mean, my flag is the earth, but I put that out there. So I love having a crucifix, and then I'm talking to somebody about shamanism, and they're looking at and I said to this one guy, not all Christians are assholes. Just saying.
Just
a lot of us are, but just
not everyone.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, okay, before we close, yes, I want to hear this poem. I was like it was like on my first set of questions, and then I decided to save it for last. And I didn't even know if you'd want to read one, and you already have one
Yeah.
teed up. So
Well,
I'm so ready.
I have one because you are a beauty maker. Those
Oh,
artists are beauty makers. This one's called Beauty. Because
oh, yay.
you asked about a poem about how my spiritual voice might come into poems at times. So this is one. May beauty break open your heart with light. May tenderness gather the pieces and compassion place them upon the altar that is this world. May wisdom place a cup upon the altar. May spirit pour that gathered light back into our even now brokenness. So we know each fragment as infinitely whole, inescapably one. That's the teaching. No matter how broke, we're like colons. No matter how broken, when I was a therapist and when I was a rape crisis counselor, I sat with people who were, because when I was a therapist, my specialty was child abuse. So I sat with people who were just a mess, brutalized. I'm sitting here going, it's a miracle I'm not in a graveyard, a mental institution, or a prison. But you know, Jane, no matter how broken, there was that infinite, untouchable light that Merton called the Pointe Vierge, the virgin point, that was always there shining. And that's, I think, another teaching that light, that beauty is was one of the Muslim names for God.
Yeah.
Beauty. Isn't that wonderful?
It is. And you will probably love that I just recently did a podcast where I talk about the core foundations of the show. And philokalia, the Greek word for the good and the beautiful, is my lodestone.
Right about the synchronicity? Of course not.
And I think you'll love this too. I had a time in Spain where I was suicidal. I was at the end of an ability. I had no more ideas. I had no more solve, and it was very calm. And I was like, I think I'm done. I was 23, 24. I was young, but I thought, I can't do this anymore, and I'm done.
Mhm.
And I felt very calm about it. And I was walking. I'd actually gone for a run, and I was kind of closing everything down. I was closing down, sort of closing up shop to leave, to go to the next world.
Yeah.
And I got all the way down, and I saw this light, this prismatic, just so powerfully luminous light, searing light, tiny little light. And it was like, oh, I can't put that out. I actually literally cannot extinguish that. I can't extinguish that. And I survived, and I stayed, and I met it, and I was like, oh, thank God. Okay, whoa, that I can't. It was almost humorous. Like, I can't put that out. And I have a tattoo right here that says love light. And it's my love light right there that just sits there, that is inextinguishable. And it's ever, I believe all of us have that. It's a complicated thought, because you see such pain and such suffering and such animosity that you wonder, well, where is it? What's happening? But on a grand scale, I have to believe that is there. And that light truly, your poem surmises it really, really perfectly. It's just beautiful and wise and perpetual.
Oh, what fun to sit with you. Thank you. And to end with beauty. By the way, my favorite name for God in the Talmud is warm breasted one.
Totally.
So we end with the mother.
I love that. I love that. It's often really beautiful mother energy with you, Ruah, and I appreciate that, and I need that. So
Well, this was just such a treat for me. I'm so glad we got to visit like this,
me too.
and I'm going to track down your podcast. I'd love to see all the things you've done. This is thrilling. You're doing this.
I
I know
know.
you've been wanting to do this, and it's like when you contacted me, it's like, oh my God, she's doing it. So
I know.
congratulations, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thank you. I mean, truly, you are a huge part of why this is possible and why I do the work that I do. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh my God, hon, I will do my best to just take a breath and take that in. You're welcome.
Totally. Well, I can't wait for this to come out, and we will send it to you when it does. And if you would like to, you can tell listeners where to find your readings or your poems or your work.
Oh, all right. Very good. I mean, basically, I have a little blog spot thing that I do where I put out a weekly contemplative poem. Only sometimes they're mine.
Mm-hmm.
But the older I get, the shorter I want poems to be, because
Sure.
I get a lot from a little.
Mm-hmm.
But I will have to, I think it's called Ruah Bull blogspot.com or something, but I don't
That's
know.
right. And I think your other website is it's some fabulous it's not Pacha Day, it's
Kapax Day.
Kapax Day. Yeah.
That's
Perfect. Okay. Well, we'll link to all of those in the show
great,
notes.
good, because this is how attuned I am to media. It's like I don't even know the address of my
that's our job. Don't even worry about that. You just get to put forth the beautiful content, and we channel it into the digital sphere. So
thank you. Yeah. All right, and listen, blessings to you and everyone who listens. My prayer is that who and what you are, how you are becoming, how you are being used as instrument and as channel, that the love light that is so much a part of you, that's at your heart, that just is radiant, may it continue to radiate out into this world that needs that love light. So blessings upon you. You are being well used, my friend.
Thank you, Ruah. Thank you so much. I really love you dearly. Thank you for doing this. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye, honey.
Bye. Thanks so much again for tuning in. Hopefully there was something in that episode that inspired you that you can take with you throughout the week. Please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share this with a friend or family member. They might find it useful also. If you want to learn more about us, you can do so at otherwisewithjaneharvey.com, and be sure to sign up for our newsletter, Music by Dash Positive. And if you want this episode in audio form, you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.